What's up, everybody? Gemini here today, and today we're going to be watching a video clip from FD Signifier talking about anime. I think personally, we should criticize things or hold things that we love to a higher standard and not look at those things with rose-colored glasses, which is why today I'm going to be partaking in a little bit of a discussion / reaction to this clip about anime and some of the weird patriarchal norms in anime. So let's get into it. Bow. Let's watch it. Oh.
And I feel like this is a good moment to interject something that I realized in editing I hadn't addressed adequately in the video, which is the problem of depictions of sex and consent and women in anime. It's something I allude to, but I realized as I was watching this over and over, getting towards release, that it really needed more time than I gave it. But the video is already 90 minutes long and there's time constraints, so I just wanted to make sure I addressed it somewhat here before moving on. When I asked here just now, is it self-aware? I'm getting at like this overarching conflict in watching anime and watching things that are clearly problematic and lewd and edgy and, you know, not appropriate for all audiences.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of anime is self-aware, to be honest, on this specific topic. There is a lot of questionable lewd things in anime, which I don't necessarily think lewd things are inherently bad, but it is how they're presented and what those lewd things are. Like the idea of like consent, not getting consent is very terrible, right? And so he's definitely hitting the nail on the head right here, where the older I get, the more uncomfortable I find myself watching certain types of anime, because I do ask myself these questions like, oh, is the creator of this aware of these things? Or I just start to feel uncomfortable around some of the like norms in anime that occurs. So I definitely get what he's saying on this. Let's take a look.
There's a very fine line between self-aware
that's
and
a crazy
and maybe trashy elements in anime that I enjoy.
That's a crazy cut.
Okay, versus things that exist in anime and thus in the anime community that are regressive and harmful and further contribute to the spreading of harmful ideologies and behavior in anime consumers.
And that is very true. I would say the like pipeline to like incel culture, from like anime to incel culture, or the pipeline to like anime to red pill culture, is very strong in anime. It's actually very strong in a lot of things, video games too, where we've kind of like sexualize women in a gross way in these mediums to the point where like people just don't see them as people. They see them as, they objectify them, and I think a problem that a lot of young men don't understand, but I do think that this is turning around, is the like over objectification of women in media and what it does to you, because I think a lot of young men are starting to see the drawbacks in their life for objectifying women, and I think anime is just another piece of media that attributes to this like factor.
If this anime that we're just talking about is satirizing the issue of lookism and fat phobia with this absurd dynamic of
don't be afraid of those words
and good and skitty, I'd maybe give it somewhat of a pass. But if it's just saying all your problems would go away if you weren't fat and ugly, well, that's a clearly different set of issues. And that line between self-aware and self-indulgent is where things get a little complex. And that goes for the problem with sex and sexuality and representation in anime as a whole, specifically in shonen anime. Thankfully, first and foremost, a great thing about anime and manga that I don't touch on in the video is that there is a huge community for girl-focused and driven content in anime, which offers clear alternatives to women's representation in this medium versus the more lewd, trashy, and shallow depictions of women that happen in shonen content.
And not just that, I do feel like a lot of shonen content today is kind of turning a new leaf. We're getting a lot of mangaka that are kind of breaking the norms of anime, and I could think of a few. I mean, although some of these themes still show up, but I can think of a few anime right now that are kind of breaking these norms, one of those animes being Dandadan. I think Dandadan is more of a like metaphor, I guess, for how young people deal with assault, essentially, or sexual assault. I'm seeing a lot more anime where these things are actually more focused on telling a very true story and explaining, you know, it is aware of these horrible norms, right? I think Dandadan is a great example of that, you know, because of how it portrays itself. You know, a lot of these characters are suffering from some sort of trauma, and they kind of like band together to like overcome it. I think Berserk is another great example, although that has been around for a long time. Berserk is a great example on overcoming something very traumatic, and the sexual themes in Berserk, they are edgy at times, don't get me wrong, for sure. Like that first chapter, crazy, but also it's how Guts overcomes his trauma, right? And I think being aware of some of the things you're putting in your media and what you are trying to convey about them is important.
Right, from the
and I don't feel like a lot of anime hits that.
Madoka Magica, I've also enjoyed stuff like Nana, Princess Jellyfish, Chihaya Fura, etc. But those shows are unfortunately not prominent in anime fandom, and thus there needs to be a conversation on the connection between this power fantasy problem for boys who like anime and what that does to images of women in these shows. It's not just that every female character falls in love with the protagonist, it's also the rampant casual sexual assault that happens for laughs in these shows.
Yeah.
Fan service in anime isn't just a problem for how it hurts stories and distracts from good characters, it also contributes to misogyny and how boys learn to see and understand women. And don't get me started on the 1,000-year-old lollies. Sex is presented to
and the pipeline to CP from anime is also very strong. And it's not with just like 1,000-year-old lollies either. It's just straight up lollies. And this is something that I think a lot of anime fans haven't addressed. I feel like it's kind of just in the corner, and a lot of anime fans obviously don't agree with it, but they also don't really do much about it. And I think that's kind of where we as fans of certain medias have to like decide what we want and what we don't want to allow in the things we love. And I think Lolly is a perfect example of things that are just kind of there, and a lot of people don't do a lot of shit about it, unfortunately. Hello, Future Gemini here. I just wanted to make a quick note on what I meant by a lot of fans aren't doing anything about it. That's actually not the case. A lot of fans do something about Lolly, do speak out about some of the questionable sexual themes in anime, but the problem is because we are in a very patriarchal society, the problems of women aren't viewed as worthy problems. And so what happens is when these people do call out these strange behaviors or these weird things in the medium form, they're kind of just told that they're being woke. They're kind of gaslit into thinking that it's not as big of an issue as it should be, or they're just straight up denied to have the audience, to have the ear, and they're denied the understanding of what they're saying. So it's not necessarily that people don't do anything, but I do want to highlight that it is because of patriarchy and these norms that occur that sort of build this culture of it's okay. And that's the problem, because it's not okay. There is no situation in which you could sexualize minors and it be okay. Back to the video.
Boys and young men in these mediums as a commodity. One they get access to, as Mother Basements just put it, by being the coolest, raddest gamer, or whatever nonsense is said in some of these spaces. Or possibly worse, if not theirs to just be lewd and for casual assault and fan service, they serve as fodder for male character motivation, something that is insidiously woven through so much media aimed at boys and men. It's a problem that I want to at least make sure I acknowledge. This to make sure nobody mistakes where I'm coming from. Because even when done innocently, this contributes to a lot of misogyny that women in these spaces and in general experience. And it also hurts the boys themselves.
And you know what? It's a crazy thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is like these kind of things either do two things, right? It teaches young men that these things are okay, but it also objectifies women. And I think both of those have severe negative impacts on just the cultural psyche, I guess you could say.
Those who consume this type of content because they never learn to just normally interact with women and girls, which in effect becomes this vicious cycle as they are often rejected from women's spaces because of their latent misogyny, which then leads them to being even more misogynistic.
Yeah.
I don't think that lewd or trashy content doesn't have a right to exist, but as I stated earlier, there is no self-awareness of the line between reality and fantasy with so much of this type of content and its fan bases. I would love to live in a world where lewd and sexualized entertainment was respected and enjoyed responsibly, but we don't have that. What we have is a culture that will cry woke agenda whenever a female character takes up too much screen time or has too many clothes on, but the same community will Google Rule 34 images of that same character. What we have is a patriarchy. I'm leaving a couple of videos in the description that I think better engage with this conversation, so please check those out if you want more analysis on those issues, or just simply search YouTube for.
And that's the end of the clip, basically. So a few things I do want to address in this like over-sexualization of female characters and certain female demographics is a lot of people don't realize, and this is something that I've kind of been like talking a lot about lately, which is like the over-sexualization of minors in anime. Most anime nowadays takes place in high school, and that's really like frustrating as an adult, because it's like I'll be watching some crazy cool shit and then these themes will pop up consistently, and you know, I don't think a lot of people have the forethought to be like, is this okay to watch, right? This is assault of a minor, or this is sexualization of a minor, and I think that's a really big problem in the anime space right now, because it does normalize a lot of really harmful and damaging ideas. And that's why the pipe to like lolly, the pipe to CP, CSAM, however you want to say it, is there in anime, because even like in anime's basic forms, it is normalizing the idea of like child predation. So that's just kind of where I stand on it. I think it's okay to criticize things you love. I do love anime. I think anime is a great medium, and there's a lot of good things. Hell, even One Piece has this same problem. I mean, look at Bonnie. Obviously, you know, Bonnie is super over-sexualized, you know, and she's not even, you know, she's 12 years old, but she's made to look like a fully grown woman. And I think those are things we should be looking at and being like, how about no? You know what I'm saying?
Whoop they do.
And that's not just the only thing in One Piece that does that. So anyways, this is pretty much all I had to say. Definitely just be careful about the media you consume and have that media literacy, you know. Understand that a lot of these creators sometimes might just be weird. It might not just be, you know, oh, it's not that deep, or oh, you know, it's whatever. I think we live in a patriarchy, so a lot of this is already pre-installed in young men or young women before we even make it to these mediums, because we're already kind of taught how to treat women and how men should act, you know what I'm saying, before we even get to these new spaces, and then it just perpetuates itself. So just don't be weird.
Whoop they do.
That's all I gotta say. Thank you for coming by. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Y'all have a good one.
Know you got my attention. Hey, when you be pretending, girl, you know that you miss it.
Whoop they do.